Barbara, for that little recap. Let's whistle-stop tour through the last 3 months, just to give people a little bit of context. So my talk is entitled Opening to the Mystery Beyond Self. Hopefully by the end of it, that it'll be a little clearer what that means. But I wanted to start, I'm going to be asking you to do some reflections yourself during this talk, just privately. You're not going to have to share them with anyone, so you can be totally honest in your own mind. And the first one is, why are you here? I mean, here at the North London Buddhist Centre. Why are you interested in Buddhism and meditation? What's that really about for you? I mean, maybe you're only here because you're interested in meditation, and maybe you're really suspicious of anything that sniffs of religion in any way. I certainly was when I first came along. And I kind of came along in a way, out of this relatively modern idea that sort of meditation is a useful set of tools to help us to sort of relax and to help us cope with life, almost to sort of make us feel better, then shove us back out there to cope with the world. And that was what attracted me when I first encountered a Buddhist centre. But what I've learned over time, so that was 19 years ago, and what I've learned over that time is that the vision of Buddhism is far, far greater, far deeper, far broader, far higher than simply a set of tools for relaxing and coping. Even though, of course, being able to relax and cope is a very good thing. I'm not knocking it. But there's so much more that this path has to offer than that. It's a bit like having a huge sort of tapestry, and you're just looking at one tiny little bit of it. And that's it's quite nice to look at the little bit of it, but actually it's connected into something much, much bigger. So this much bigger is the mystery of the title today, the mystery beyond self. So again, going back to sort of your own experience, it's really important. The Buddha was very clear that you look into your own experience, you check out whatever you're being taught, you check it out in your own experience to see if it rings true for you. So you're not being asked to sort of blindly believe something, you check it out for yourself. So we can and we do, we all have glimpses of this mystery. So one example of glimpses of this mystery is experiences of heightened significance. So I don't know if you've ever had an experience where you're in a situation and it's like there's something animating your experience from beyond what's in front of you. I've got an example of many years ago, it's probably about 30 years ago now, I was traveling in Thailand on my own. It's the first time I'd ever gone traveling on my own. I didn't tell my parents I was on my own, but I did go on my own. And I met some people and we were hanging out and we were in the forest, and it was a beautiful day, and we were by this waterfall, and then we heard these monkeys playing in the trees. And I can see it very vividly in my eye. I remember looking up through the leaves. The sun was coming through the leaves, and I looked up through the leaves, and I could sort of see these flashes of the monkeys kind of dancing through the tree canopy. And I just had this sort of, I don't know, I can't even describe it, but there just seemed something much more significant in that. There was something huge in that. It was like my spirit sort of soared through that experience. So I could say, oh yeah, I saw the monkeys playing in the trees. And you might think, oh yeah, that's nice. But it was something much more than that. That's all I can say. These things are very difficult because they sort of goes beyond words. So that's one example of a glimpse of this mystery beyond self. I wasn't a Buddhist at the time, so I didn't have that language for it. I was just like, kind of like, wow. That was about the only language I had for it. So that's one example, experiences of heightened significance. Another example is experiences of beauty. And I mean sort of, what do I mean? In our culture, we can really be encouraged to think that beauty means something expensive and glamorous and sexy. And I'm not really talking about that kind of beauty. I'm talking about I find it in nature mostly, but you can find it, you can lose yourself in the beauty of nature. You can lose yourself in a piece of music. You can lose yourself in a dance performance or a work of art. And it's really those experiences of beauty where you do have that sense, even for a moment, of that you have kind of, you for a moment, you're sort of not there. You're just completely taken up by this experience of beauty. I can see a few people nodding. Sunsets are a good one. Most people can remember a sunset when they've gone, kind of lost themselves in it. And we use this word beauty. So we'll say, oh gosh, it's so beautiful, but that doesn't really, it's just a word, isn't it? The actual experience goes far beyond that word. Another example, and of course there's some overlap between these types of examples. Another example is a deep experience of meaningfulness. Now, I don't mean meaning in the sense of like a conceptual sense, where you kind of go, oh, well, that means this. It's a non-conceptual, it's kind of a much deeper sense of when you can feel that something you're engaged in is profoundly meaningful in some way that is beyond you. It doesn't negate you. It's not that you don't matter. It's just that it's beyond you. My strongest experiences of that have been when I've been on retreats. Put your hand up if you've been on a retreat of any kind. Oh wow, quite a lot of you have been. Yeah. So I don't know if that was your experiences too, but something about particularly in the shrine room, when they've got a full shrine room and it's very beautiful and you're in a beautiful place. And for me, I'm trying to talk to people from a place of what feels like deep truth. There's a meaningfulness in that, again, that you can't really put into words. So we've got heightened significance, beauty, meaningfulness. And the fourth example is experiences of unselfish love. Now, love is a bit of a loaded topic, isn't it? It tends to mean, in our culture, it tends to mean romantic love, sexual love, or, family love of some kind. And not that there's anything wrong with any of those from a Buddhist point of view, but this is this kind of unselfish love goes way beyond that. For those of you that are, well, you're probably all a little bit familiar with this idea of metta, because I think Kshanti Sara was teaching the Metta Bhavana. Were you doing the Metta Bhavana? Yes. So even if you're brand new today, this sense of this unconditional sort of, a love that's not based in looking after me. So, when you hear those just incredibly moving stories about complete strangers sort of diving into rivers to save drowning children, or rushing into burning buildings to pull somebody out, there's something incredibly beautiful in that. That level of unselfish love for another being, and care and concern for another being. So those are places where something may be ringing a bell for you when you've had a glimpse of this mystery beyond your day-to-day life, beyond the getting up, doing whatever you do in the day, watching a bit of Netflix and going to bed again, something beyond all of that. Now, in the secular world, these experiences can be slightly sort of, I don't know, like not quite dismissed, but can be sort of something of the sort of magic and sacredness of these experiences can be sort of be a bit dampened down. You know, people can describe it as sort of, oh yes, it's a sort of, it's an aesthetic experience, you know, as if that sort of, I don't know, as if that explains what it means. But our ancestors, our, you know, the humans, the original human family from which we all have descended, they could see so much more. They were so much more deeply connected with the mysteries of the universe, the world, the nature, that whole. We're so sophisticated in a certain way in our modern life that we just take it all for granted. But it's an absolute miracle, isn't it, when those leaves start to come out on the trees? You know, how do they do that? How do they know to do that? And you can say, oh, there's all this biology, and yes, that's true, but there's still something incredible. You know, you look at a tiny little acorn, and then you look at a massive oak tree, and you think, how on earth can all of that be in there? You know, it's just incredible. And our own minds, you know, we're very good at developing our intellects, but our minds are so much broader and wider and deeper and more mysterious and more magical than that. But in our culture, we're sort of not really encouraged to dwell deeply in the sheer mystery of being alive, because the sheer mystery of being alive doesn't make you go and buy things. And our culture is, you know, it's about encouraging us to buy things. It's about encouraging us to not be satisfied with who we are and what we have, so that we'll go and spend some money. But this sheer mystery of life, it's hidden in plain sight. You know, it's everywhere. Everywhere we look, if we choose to see it, it's a complete miracle. But we need to sort of get out of our own way and let ourselves be filled with that miracle. And I think in the modern world, particularly, I think perhaps for city dwellers, maybe that's not true, I don't know. I mean, I include myself in that. We can just be a little bit kind of like savvy and a bit sophisticated and a bit sort of cynical and a bit sort of smart. And we sort of lose something in that. We lose this incredible sense of wonder and awe. Children have it, little children have it. And of course, we gradually train them not to have it. That's what our sort of society does, our school systems tends to do. But, you know, if you ever watch little children in the park, they're just completely like, oh, wow, Daddy, look at this. Or, oh, wow. And, oh, you know, they're completely sort of mesmerized by life, until they gradually unlearn it. And instead, we all learn to focus on money, status, romance, procreation. Those are our main things that we sort of learn are important in life. And I'm not saying any of the, I'm not saying that to throw away your entire life. I don't mean it in that way. I'm just saying those are, the amount of importance that we put on those things, they cannot deliver what we want from them. We expect them to deliver this happy, fulfilled life, and they won't. Or if they do, they'll only do it temporarily, and then something will change, and it'll all go wrong again. I hope that doesn't sound too depressing, because what I'm saying is, if we can open to the wonder and the awe that is beyond, that is out there everywhere, then that, you know, how we are in our day-to-day life, we're not going to get so buffeted around by that. So Ratnaprabha mentioned this third stage of the spiritual path, which we in our movement call spiritual death, which basically means the death is a kind of metaphoric sense in a way. It's a sort of putting aside of all of those mundane concerns. It's not saying they don't matter at all, but it's kind of placing them to one side, and allowing, sort of getting out of our own way, is the spiritual death bit, and allowing in the mystery and the wonder. And when we allow in that mystery and that wonder, then we get the spiritual rebirth. That's the flip side of the spiritual death. So this mystery beyond self we call spiritual rebirth within how we sort of name the spiritual path in Triratna Buddhism. So when we go through this spiritual rebirth, and I can, as I said, if you think of those glimpses that you've had in your life, in that moment we are losing our preoccupation with me. When I was sitting there on the side of a volcano in Hawaii looking at the sunset over the ocean, I was just completely in the sunset. And for those moments, I wasn't there. I was just completely in the sunset. So something else comes through, something bigger and deeper and much more meaningful. And it's something that's incredibly nourishing. If you let yourself dwell in it, it's incredibly nourishing. What we tend to do is go, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Oh, let's take a picture, click, and then we're off. But if we can really let ourselves be with it, which is a chance that you have when you're on retreat, it will really nourish you. And it's not quite the same. Sometimes people could think, oh yes, I felt like that when I fell in love. It's not really quite the same as falling in love, because when we fall in love, what we tend to do is we tend to lose ourselves in the other person. It's more like we lose ourselves in a place where the idea of self and other is no longer relevant. There's something beyond self and other that comes through. So the trouble with trying to describe it in words is that all of our language is based on the idea of self and other. Like, there's me here and there's this cushion here, which is other than me. There's me here, there's these people out here that are other than me. There isn't really a language. And all of our attempts to put it into language, or everything I'm saying now, we're trying to point towards something that defies description. So I'm just hoping by encouraging you to sort of reflect on your own experience that you can get some sort of embodied sense from your own life experience. Yes, and we can nurture those glimpses by consciously dwelling with them, not dismissing them as trivial or fanciful or not really important. And within that, there's something about honoring our imagination, honoring this deep faculty of imagination, which is kind of tends to get a bit of it tends, in our culture again, it tends to play second fiddle to kind of the language of technology, the language of science. That's seen as sort of real, that's really how the world is. It's technical, it's scientific, and everything else is a bit fanciful and sort of painted over the top as a bit of entertainment. But from the Buddha's point of view, and from the point of view of thousands of years of humankind, that's all backwards. Of course, science can be a wonderful thing and technology can be a wonderful thing, but what makes us most deeply human is our imaginative faculty. So we can reverse this conditioning that we've had, which is to sort of focus on material things and science and technology as being sort of the important things in life, or creating the important things in life. We can work consciously against that in our practice by opening and allowing ourselves to reverence these experiences that we have of something more wonderful and magical and mysterious beyond. And even if you don't quite believe that, you sort of think, oh, that's all very well, it all sounds a little bit hippy-dippy from someone who's sitting there with a funny Buddhist name. Obviously, she's going to think that. But, you know, I had a science background, which my first degree was in science. And even if you don't quite believe what I'm saying, I would invite you to experiment in your own mind with as if. What would it be like for you to walk home today and walk through the park or wherever it is as if there's this magic and this mystery and this beauty beyond yourself, and see what effect that has on you to do that. You could go back to being cynical afterwards if you want to, completely up to you. I'm just inviting you to do that experiment in your own mind. Okay. So it's kind of as if there's a force or a principle that's working through us from beyond us that's not mine. You have to be very careful with this language because it can begin to sound a bit like God, and it most definitely isn't God in the sort of theistic sense of what God means, because the Buddha wasn't a God. He was a human being who saw completely through saw completely through into this mystery. So we can imagine it as if there is this mysterious force beyond us that is kind of coming through us. And one could even think that you might think, oh, I came along today because I'm curious about meditation, or I'm interested in Buddhism. You could think of it as that there's some mysterious force flowing that has drawn you here today. And we say, oh yes, it was my idea to come along today because I'm interested in this. Or you could think, wow, something's pulling me here, something's drawing me, something that I don't quite understand, or maybe I don't even fully welcome, but I still find myself here and I find myself a bit curious. Again, you could think of that as if something's coming from beyond little you, little me. So I'm going to read out a parable that illustrates this. And actually, some of the material that I've used from today and this parable comes from, quick plug, The Journey and the Guide, which is the course that Ratnaprabha is going to be starting next week, very soon. Week after next.
20th of April.
20th of April. It's a fantastic course. Anyway, so I'm going to read you out, in case all of that sounds a little bit out there. I'm going to read you a story. So if you're sitting comfortably, then I'm going to begin. Once upon a time, a toad jumped into a well. Now, in the well, there lived a small population of well-dwelling frogs. The well-dwelling frogs had lived in that deep well all their life, just as their parents had and their parents' parents. Now, the toad tried to tell the well-dwelling frogs that they were living in a well, and that beyond the well, up in the fresh air, was a world of mudflats and fields, trees and mountain ranges. But the well-dwelling frogs couldn't understand. They thought the toad was trying to trick them. They had no word for field or tree or mountain or river. So one of the frogs took pity on the toad and volunteered to show him around. "Our world is vast and spacious," said the frog, jumping from one side of the well to the other. "Let me show you where we bury our dead. Let me show you our druid stones, our pleasure palaces, our breeding grounds and our war zones." Now, for centuries, the well-dwelling frogs had worshipped God. His name was Oculus, which means eye. The well-dwelling frog pointed to the round opening high above their heads. "Can you see him?" He said. "We must bow." And the well-dwelling frog bowed a deep bow to the god Oculus. "Sometimes when Oculus is happy," continued the frog, "he sends rays of light to sparkle on the water. But when he's angry, he thunders and makes the cruel forks that blind us. Sometimes he weeps and fills the world with tears. For centuries we've worshipped him. But you know what? Some while ago, one frog decided that none of our prayers, none of our worship made any difference, and said, Oculus is not a god. He's just a hole in the sky. He's nothing. Since then, said the frog, there's been a lot of mudslinging. He paused for a moment, looked very sad, and then said, those of us who worship Oculus are called ascenders. We look up to an ideal, to truth, beauty, and love. We want to leave this world of mud and pain behind and ascend to God. The frog looked around and said, Descenders is the name we have for those who think that all the world is only this world. For them, truth lies here at our feet. They say we're always trying to escape the mucky realities of day-to-day life, that our desire to ascend into the higher realms makes us ridiculous. Reality for you, you only think of you descenders, we shout back at you, you descenders, you only think of your own gratification. Reality for you is just mud and grit wherever you look. So for many years, there's been a battle between ascenders looking up to God and the descenders denying God. He looked up at the round hole high above their heads. Then he turned to the toad and said, have you come with a message from Oculus? But the toad shook his head. The frog looked crestfallen. Have you come to say there's only mud and slime and breeding water? Once again, the toad shook his head. And from that day on, the toad taught the well-dwelling frogs everything he knew. Because the frogs had no word for hill and barley field, apple or cloud, the toad had to teach the ascenders and descenders in a language they could understand. He wanted to say, you're both wrong. The truth is, you're living in a hole. But when he said that, they just looked at him uncomprehendingly. So he had to find something they had experienced and say, it's a bit like this. After a long time, some of the well-dwelling frogs began to understand. So maybe that's kind of obvious, but in case it isn't, I'm just going to unpack that a little bit. So the frogs, the well-dwelling frogs, that's us. We live in this world. We think it's everything, our world, our creation. And there's this polarity between people who take a very literalist view of religion, the ascenders, the ones looking up to this ideal beyond this world, wanting to get out of this world and beyond it, and relying on this external thing, believing in this external thing. So that's one route that we can go down. Of course, the opposite, and more common perhaps in modern culture, is this kind of anti-religious, secularist, materialist view that that's all sort of mumbo-jumbo nonsense, superstition, and that actually all we've got is this life here and now, and when it's over, it's like turning the computer off at the end of the day, you know, the lights go out and it's all over. And the toad represents the Buddha and his lifetime of trying to point to the truth that actually neither of these is the whole truth. That the truth, the real truth, the real truth of spiritual rebirth is above and beyond both of these polarities. Yes, we have our earthly life, full of our human needs, our earthly needs, our animal needs. And yes, there is something much bigger and beyond that. It's not a God, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not a God on a cloud in the sky. It's something much more mysterious. It's not one or the other. It's something else beyond words. So how can we move towards this vision that can't really be described in words, and experience more of this spiritual rebirth, a sense of rebirth? Well, meditation, as Ratnaprabha was saying, the first two stages of the path, meditation to develop, to integrate ourselves, to develop clarity and emotional positivity, that will help to clear our minds and make our minds more fertile to be able to receive, these kind of messages from beyond that are all around us. So meditation is one way. Living our lives as ethically as possible in support of our meditation, by which the Buddha means a natural sense of ethics that is based on kindness towards others, truth, honesty, generosity, clarity. So, meditation, living as ethically as possible, seeing the importance of conditions. Because we tend to think of ourselves as a separate being that kind of walks around and functions in the world, we can really, really overlook the huge effect of the conditions that we find ourselves in. So the more we can really take that on board and choose to live our lives, choose to steer our lives towards conditions that are going to be conducive to our own growth and flourishing and the growth and flourishing of others. And that's in terms of how we live our lives, what we do for a living, how we are in the world, who we associate with, the things that we spend our time doing online, all of that, all of those are conditions that will shape your mind, will shape my mind. And we do have at least some choice in some of those things. So meditation, living as ethically as possible, seeing the importance of conditions, and finally cultivating and dwelling in our imaginative faculty. So the more and more we can do this, the more we move to living in the reality of this mystery beyond self. And the more we can live in that reality of the mystery beyond self, our natural response to that will be compassion for ourselves and for others and for the world. So the more we can live beyond this mystery of self and touch into that natural compassion, that's the true way to freedom.